Welcome back to DarkFrame Stories, where the past never truly rests. They say some bells are rung for the living, some for the dead, but this bell was neither. It rang for the ones it wanted to keep. The year was 1792, in the village of Ashcombe, Sussex. The bog was nothing special, a patch of wet earth on the edge of the heath. Shallow water, rushes bending in the wind, dragonflies gliding above its slick green skin. The locals called it Mire Hollow. Children were told to stay away, not because of ghosts or curses. The bell was cast in London, paid for by the Ashcombe congregation. Tall as a man, heavy as a horse, with a voice meant to carry for miles. It was hoisted into the tower with a day's labor, blessed by the vicar, and struck for the first time at evening service. The sound was rich, deep, comforting. The villagers were proud, but they had no idea it would never ring from the tower again. That night, the storm came. Rain lashed the village for hours. Thunder rolled over the hills like cannon fire, and in the morning, the tower was empty. The bell was gone. At first, they thought thieves had taken it, but there were no tracks, no signs of struggle, no broken timbers. Then someone saw it, half buried in the mud at the edge of Mire Hollow. Impossible. The bog was half a mile from the church. The men of the village tried to haul it free. They wrapped it in ropes, strained against the weight. But the bell didn't budge. By nightfall, it had sunk lower. By morning, it was gone. That night, he didn't come home. His flock wandered back without him. The villagers searched for days. They found nothing. By winter, more had gone missing. Always the same story, the toll in the night, and someone gone by morning. No one spoke of it openly. The vicar preached on faith and temptation, but the villagers stopped walking past the bog after sundown. They swore if you stood too close when the bell rang, you could see ripples spreading outward, like something was moving beneath. One night, the widow Elspeth awoke to the toll. She swore she saw her dead husband standing at the foot of her bed, smiling. He took her hand, led her out into the frost, and they walked toward Mire Hollow. She was never seen again. By spring, the fear was thicker than the mist, and that's when Jonathan Blake arrived. A man of books, an antiquarian with a taste for strange histories. He had come to Sussex, chasing whispers of an ancient bell cursed long before Ashcombe was built. A bell that was never meant to hang in a church. Jonathan listened to the villagers. Chilled him. They said, the bell's voice was not made to call the faithful. It was made to call the promised. Centuries ago, a bargain had been struck. A life given for every toll. And if the bell could not have its life, it would take another. Jonathan decided to see it for himself. He waited for the night the moon was full, walked alone to the bog. The air was thick, the water black, and then the toll. It rose up from the depths, slow, patient, inevitable. And from beneath the water, something began to move. Jonathan stood at the water's edge, lantern trembling in his hand. The glow caught the thin crust of ice that had formed at the shallows. Beyond that, the water was open and black, swallowing the moonlight whole. The toll had stopped, but the air still vibrated, as if the sound had settled into the earth itself. Then, ripples. Something was rising. A shape broke the surface, smooth and slick with mud. It wasn't the bell, it was a stone. No, a carved slab. Symbols gouged deep into its face, twisting, interlocking patterns that Jonathan didn't recognize. He crouched to get a closer look, and then, without warning, the slab sank again, gone, as though it had never been there. Behind him, a voice, "You shouldn't be here." Jonathan spun. A man stood in the mist, gaunt, hollow-eyed, his coat hanging loose over his frame. He carried no lantern. "You're the antiquarian," the man said, "the one asking questions." Jonathan nodded slowly. "Yes, and you are." The man didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer. "The bell doesn't like questions. It only likes promises." Jonathan frowned. "What kind of promises?" "Blood. Always blood. Doesn't matter if it's given or taken." Jonathan pressed him, but the man only shook his head. "It's not my debt to pay." And then he turned and walked into the fog, gone. The next morning, Jonathan went to the parish records. The vicar was reluctant, but curiosity was a strong enough sin to open the church's locked chest. The oldest records were brittle, half-faded. But there, between lists of baptisms and marriages, was something strange. An entry from 1541. No names, only a single sentence, written in a careful hand. Bell delivered, blood given, debt accepted. Jonathan traced the ink with his finger. What kind of church keeps a record like that? He kept searching. In a later ledger, dated 1607, he found another entry. Debt unpaid, Bell claimed. It didn't make sense. Why would a bell take anything? It was just iron and bronze. Unless, that evening, he visited Di Morgan, the oldest man in the village, bedridden but still sharp. Di listened as Jonathan explained what he'd found. When Jonathan finished, the old man nodded slowly. The bell you're looking for didn't come from London, not the first time. It came from her." Jonathan's skin prickled. Her. Who? Di's eyes clouded. "The one they drowned here, long before my great-grandfather's time. She cursed this land, cursed its people, and when they took her from the water, they found a bell in her hands, small, black as pitch," she said. "When it rings, I will have what I am owed." Jonathan leaned forward. That night, Jonathan dreamed of the bog. The water steamed. The bell hung just beneath the surface, swinging without a rope. And on the far bank, a woman stood. Her hair floated like ink in water, her skin pale as milk, her eyes locked on his. She opened her mouth, and the toll burst from her lips. Jonathan woke, drenched in sweat, not to listen, but to follow the sound. If the bell was beneath the bog, he would find it. Jonathan waited until the village had gone to sleep. The frost lay thick on the hedgerows. A thin mist curled along the lane toward Mire Hollow. He carried no lantern this time, only a length of rope, only the faint creak of ice shifting on the surface. Jonathan stepped to the edge. The mud sucked at his boots. The rope trailed from his shoulder into the black water. He took a breath and stepped in. The first shock was the cold. It bit straight through wool and skin, sinking into bone. Each step pulled him deeper, ankle, knee, thigh. The surface rippled outward, swallowing the moon's reflection. And then, the toll. It was softer now. Not the great booming cry he had heard before, but close, intimate, almost, inside his skull. His heartbeat matched it, every thud pulling him further in. Jonathan's hands shook. He looped the rope around his waist, fixing it to the shore. If he went under, at least they might find him. The toll grew louder. Water climbed to his chest. The mud beneath his feet seemed to give way, and suddenly he was falling. Jonathan plunged into darkness. The bog's cold clamped around him. He thrashed, but something caught his wrist. A hand, small bone white in the gloom. It pulled him down. Through the murk, he saw her, the woman from his dream, her eyes hollow but burning with an inner light. Her lips parted, the toll burst from her mouth again, but this close, it was deafening. The sound filled the water, shook his skull, crushed the breath from his chest. Images flared in his mind. A village in flames, a crowd at the water's edge, and in her hands, the black bell. She tried to hold it above the surface. One last defiance. But the water swallowed her. The toll was the last thing they heard before the ripples smoothed over. Jonathan's chest burned. He kicked free, tearing himself from her grip. The water around him shook with the force of the bell's voice. And then, silence. He broke the surface, gasping, crawled back toward the shore, rope dragging behind him. Mud clung to his face, his clothes, but in his ears, the toll still rang. From the far side of the bog, the woman stood, dry, perfectly still, watching him. The outline of something vast, half hidden in the fog. The shape of a bell. Jonathan stumbled back to the vicarage before dawn. His boots left a trail of black water across the stone floor. The fire in the hearth had long since died. He sat there in the dark, listening. The toll was still there, faint, beating in time with his own heart. Every few moments, it would grow louder, like the bell was testing its hold on him. By mid-morning, Jonathan knew he couldn't stay silent. He found the vicar and told him everything. The old man didn't laugh, he didn't doubt. He only poured them both a cup of tea and sat heavily in the chair across from him. "You've heard it properly, then," the vicar said. "It doesn't just call, it chooses." Jonathan leaned forward. "What does it want from me?" The vicar's gaze drifted to the window. Outside, the mist had thickened. The same thing it's always wanted. A life in payment for a life denied. "But you're marked now." Jonathan's skin prickled. "You've known about this all along." The vicar's eyes were tired. "It's older than the church, older than Ashcombe. We keep our heads down, we bury our dead fast, and we pray the toll passes us by." Jonathan thought of the woman in the bog, her hand gripping his wrist, the way the water had thrummed with her voice. She hadn't been just a victim, she was the bell. That night, Jonathan returned to Di Morgan's bedside. The old man listened without a word. When Jonathan finished, Di gave a slow nod. "Then you've seen her for what she is. She was wronged, aye, but she took the wrong bargain. The bell doesn't free you, it binds you tighter." Jonathan asked the question that had been pressing on him since the beginning. "How do you break it?" Di hesitated. "You don't, unless..." Jonathan's eyes narrowed. "Unless what?" Jonathan frowned. "And what would that be?" Di stared at him for a long moment. "A willing life. One that walks into the bog knowing the cost, and walks back out again." Jonathan almost laughed. "That's impossible." The old man's eyes didn't move from his eye. "That's why it hasn't been done." That night, Jonathan couldn't sleep. Every time his eyes closed, he saw her face, felt the cold grip on his wrist, heard the toll rolling through the water like a heartbeat he could never escape. And then he understood. The only way to stop it was to take its place. In the morning, Jonathan packed a small satchel. No lantern, no rope this time. Only a heavy iron cross he took from the church wall. The vicar tried to stop him, but Jonathan was already walking toward Mire Hollow. The bog lay still under the pale winter sun. No ripples, no wind, no sign of the shape he'd seen in the fog. Jonathan stepped to the water's edge, closed his eyes and whispered, "I'm here." The toll came at once, loud, clear, pulling him forward with each peal. He waded in. The water climbed. The cold clamped down on his chest. The surface broke around him as something rose, the black curve of the bell's crown. And beside it, her. She didn't speak, didn't smile, only watched him come closer. When he was near enough to touch her, she lifted a pale hand and laid it over his heart. The toll grew deafening. Jonathan's vision blurred. The world narrowed to the sound and the cold. Her hand on his chest was lighter than he expected, but the cold of it went straight through him, like she was touching his heart directly. Jonathan's breath came shallow. His knees trembled under the water's drag. She tilted her head, studying him. There was no anger there, no cruelty, just hunger. The toll rolled again. It wasn't coming from the bell this time. It was coming from inside his ribcage. He felt the vibration in his bones. His thoughts slowed. The edges of the world softened. In the fog above the water, faces began to appear. The shepherd, the widow Elspeth, the missing child. They all stood silently, eyes fixed on him. No mouths moving, no sound but the toll. They were waiting. Jonathan gripped the iron cross tighter. The weight of it dragged at his arm. He remembered Di's words, "Give it something it can't keep." And he knew what that meant now. He stepped closer until he was almost touching her. The water swirled around them. The bell's black curve loomed behind her like the mouth of a cave. Jonathan lifted the cross between them. The iron was slick with water and mud. The woman's eyes flicked down to it. For the first time, she stepped back. The toll wavered. A faint crack crept into the sound, like metal under strain. Jonathan took another step forward. The faces in the fog seemed to lean closer, watching. The woman's lips parted. Her voice was low, but it cut through the water like a knife. "If you take it, you can't return it." Jonathan's chest tightened. The toll pressed harder in his ears. Desperate now, he held the cross high. The water began to thrash around him. Bubbles surged up from the depths. The bell groaned like a wounded animal. Then, in one motion, Jonathan slammed the iron cross down onto the bell's crown. A sound tore through the bog. Not a toll this time, but a scream. The water shuddered. The faces in the fog rippled and vanished. The woman staggered back, her form flickering like a dying flame. Jonathan felt the pull loosen in his chest. The toll faltered, then silence. The bell sank into the black. The water smoothed over, and the woman was gone. Jonathan stood in the freezing bog, the cross still in his hand. The mist thinned. The faces did not return. He turned and walked back to the shore. Every step felt heavier, not from the water, but from something that had settled inside him. When he reached the edge, the vicar was there. He said nothing, just took Jonathan's arm and helped him out. Jonathan looked back once. Mire Hollow lay calm, no ripples, no toll, but deep in his chest, a faint echo remained. The next morning, the village was quieter than it had been in years. No one said it out loud, but everyone felt it. The air was lighter. The shadows seemed less deep. Jonathan stayed in Ashcombe for 3 more days. Each night, he went to bed expecting to hear it again, that deep, rolling toll. But the bog stayed silent. On the 4th day, he visited Di Morgan one last time. The old man studied him with sharp, tired eyes. "It's gone, then?" Jonathan hesitated. "Yes, I think so." Di nodded slowly. "Then you've given it something it couldn't keep." Jonathan didn't explain what he'd done. Some things were better left untold. But as he packed his satchel to leave the village, he noticed something strange. The iron cross he'd carried into the bog was gone. He had no memory of letting it go, but in his dreams, he saw it, still resting on the bell's crown in the dark. On the road out of Ashcombe, the mist rolled low over the hedges. He paused for a moment, listening. Nothing, no toll, only the whisper of the wind through the grass. But just as he turned away, a single, faint chime, so soft he almost convinced himself he imagined it. That night, in a market town miles from the bog, Jonathan walked past the church square. The bell in the tower gave a single, low toll, though no one had touched the rope. Every head in the square turned toward it. Some smiled. Jonathan didn't. He kept walking, and for the rest of his life, he never went near a bog again. You're part of this now. You're subscribed, whether you meant to be or not.